Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 250, cover dated late October 1989. And the cover here by Silvestri in green features Zaladane and Lorna Polaris, with the caption "Polaris no more." And if you don't look for it particularly, you are bound to miss, because of the colouring here, guest starring Ka-Zar as well. So actually I missed that until I really examined the cover. Bad colouring choices there on that one. So let's open this up, and the story opens in Antarctica at the Vostok 3 research station, manned year-round by a team from the Soviet Academy of Sciences. So they're here socializing in their station, and they're talking here, and this is an indication of the year that this comic came out. The big blockbuster movies of the year: Indiana Jones, Ghostbusters, that'd be Ghostbusters 2, and Batman from the summer of 1989. And they're talking about getting bootleg copies of those on video. But in the middle of their conversation, there is an unexpected, it seems like an earthquake, but actually it isn't. As suddenly, as speedily, as thoroughly as the base itself is obliterated by a tower of gleaming chrome. And here's our splash page of this chrome tower, which it turns out is one of the structures secreted in Antarctica by the High Evolutionary, and not ultimately used by him. And it has been raised by Zaladane for her own purposes, because she is intent on using one of the machines left behind by the High Evolutionary for her particular plan, which we'll get to shortly. So this is the 250th issue of the Uncanny X-Men, recognized here, and the title of the story is The Shattered Star. And the creative team is Chris Claremont, writer as ever, Marc Silvestri, once again Joe Rosen misspelling Silvestri's first name, and then Steve Leialoha, guest finisher. So what that means is that Silvestri is providing loose pencils, maybe even breakdowns on some pages, and Leialoha is rendering that, the detail of that, and inking as well. Joe Rosen on letters, and Glynis Oliver colouring. So at the end of the previous issue, the X-Men and Zaladane came to a détente whereby they allowed her to leave Punta Arenas, and she has made her way to this particular base in Antarctica. And amongst her troops is a disguised Alex Summers Havok, who's wondering what's the purpose of the tower. And in the background we see one of the mutates, Lupo, here highlighted, and here he is again, looking fairly ominous in terms of his relation to Alex there, and we'll see how that pans out a little later on. So Alex is pondering whether he should intervene when Zaladane's troops are killing the Soviets who've survived the raising of the tower, but he decides that he should bide his time, watch and learn all he can before he makes a move. So then our scene switches to the inside of the structure, where Zaladane uses one of the High Evolutionary's machines to, as it turns out, transfer Lorna Dane's power over the forces of magnetism to herself. At this point, Havok decides to intervene, but Zaladane was expecting him, and it turns out that both blind Raza, and Lupo here were able to identify Havok despite his disguise. So he is neutralized, and Amphibious here uses the Black Lotus that was used on Lorna in the previous issue to send Havok to Dreamland, as they put it in the previous issue. So then finally Zaladane uses the machine, and this is basically the panel here that is used as the template for the cover. Uses the machine to transfer Polaris's powers to herself, and one means of doing that is not just the machine, but the fact that the two are apparently sisters, and that will be explored a little later in upcoming issues. So Havok is distraught at what's happened here, and it appears that Zaladane is successful and triumphant in the transfer of powers. So then our scene switches to the Savage Land generally, and Zaladane has moved to her futuristic citadel, looming against the mountain skyline, also built by the High Evolutionary. And this is where she removes herself, her troops, and the mutates. And it turns out that in that particular citadel, there's this new mutate character. This is his first appearance, Worm, a pretty disgusting character here in Silvestri's design. And what he does is he secretes a substance that coats his victim and that allows him to control them bodily. So a pretty horrific power this guy has, and it's used on some of the surviving Soviets that Zaladane decided could be of use to her. Meanwhile, the X-Men, last seen in Punta Arenas, have arrived in the Savage Land and have tracked Zaladane to this particular citadel, and Psylocke is using her power to find out what's going on inside the citadel. And at this point she knows that Havok has been made by the mutates and is captured. So Psylocke is so disgusted by what Worm is doing and what else is going on in the citadel that she strips off her armor and needs to go for a cleansing dip in this pool here. Some commentators online are wondering about this, whether there was some kind of miscommunication between Claremont and Silvestri. That's how Claremont explains this scene in the dialogue. Colossus jumps in order to save her, but his body is turned against him, and obviously this is something to do with Zaladane using her magnetic powers. The how she knows he's here is unclear, and he's drowning Psylocke, who uses her psychic power to communicate with Ali to shoot at Colossus. But this traumatizes Ali because she's flashing back to what happened at the end of Uncanny X-Men 247, where she blasted Rogue, and Rogue was lost in the Siege Perilous. So she hesitates and is lost as Worm comes up behind her and secretes his goop, whatever it is, over her. And as she says here, thinks here herself, it's like she's been sealed in plastic. And then Worm uses his power to make her shoot at the other X-Men as Psylocke loses consciousness underwater. And then we have this strange sequence where it's a kind of dream vision, where she finds herself in Australia in her armor and going around the town that is the current headquarters of the surviving X-Men. She comes across the bodies of her teammates, including herself. Now this robot body here, it seems to me, is a callback to what we saw in number 248, which opened with the Reavers attacking Wolverine, but the Wolverine turned out to be a robot facsimile. So this seems to be a reference to the Reavers training on robot facsimiles of the X-Men. That's my interpretation, at least, of what's going on here in this dream vision. And then we see the same with the other X-Men, Colossus, Dazzler here, and presumably this is Havok. And she comes across a manacled Gateway 2 who holds up to her the Siege Perilous. And this gives her the idea that if the X-Men are fated to die, if they return to the Outback town, the gem, the portal crystal of the Siege Perilous, is this our only hope to run away? Okay, so how will that turn out? Well, it'll be explored in the next issue, number 251. So then we go back to Antarctica and back to Zaladane's citadel and its dungeon, where Lorna and Havok are strung up, and obviously some time has passed because Havok's beard has grown out here. And down in the dungeon there is Lupo, Brainchild, and Amphibious, and they are mocking and threatening the X-Men, in particular Lorna. The implication of what they might do is fairly horrific. But the scene switches back to the throne room, and we get the arrival of Savage Land stalwarts, Ka-Zar, his wife Shanna, and also Nereel, and Peter here with Ka-Zar and Shanna's baby. And Peter, it was revealed in Uncanny X-Men Annual number 12, is Peter Rasputin, Colossus's son. He doesn't know that that is his son. Worm is called in to, or he's using his powers on the X-Men here, in particular Dazzler, to bring the prisoners forward. And then Zaladane cruelly suggests that Colossus kill the boy. And of course, Zaladane doesn't know that Colossus is Peter's father, but the reader who's picked up the annual does know this. And again, it makes it quite horrific, the possible outcome of this. So then the scene switches back again to the dungeon, and Lorna, who's been deprived of her powers of over magnetic forces, has somehow gained new powers. She's gained height, bulk, and strength, and she uses the strength to rip free from her manacles and uses those chains to take down Amphibious and Lupo, and resists the blast, the Brainchild's blaster, and so she realizes that she's got invulnerability too. So then she frees Havok, and her thought balloon is interesting. She recognizes herself that she's now taller than Havok. What's happening here? Why are we both so changed? She says, because Havok too, she recognizes that Havok sounds wild in his own way also. So what's going on? It's not explained in this issue. Then we switch back up to the throne room, and we have the situation where Colossus is about to kill his own son, and it's resolved by Havok blasting free from the dungeon, Lorna arriving also to the rescue, and we have Ka-Zar snapping free of his manacles. Little Peter there grabbing a blaster, and then Psylocke instructs him to use the blaster on Worm. So once Worm is knocked unconscious, it frees the other X-Men from his control, and this turns the tide of the battle. So Zaladane makes a quick exit, and as the citadel is coming down around everyone, it's time for the X-Men and the rest to leave. But not before knocking out Barbarous and Raza. So they leave, and as they're leaving on one of these flyers, one of the High Evolutionary's flyers, Havok sets to plasma blast the citadel to obliterate it, but the blast bounced off the citadel, and so it must be something to do with a defense system of the citadel, or Zaladane operating to protect the citadel from destruction. And so what we have there is, I was thinking about this, it's a little bit like a reconfiguration of what we got at the end of the 4-part Genosha storyline, where Alex blew up the citadel, the Genoshan citadel, and this time round unsuccessful in blowing up Zaladane's citadel. Yeah, so Polaris reckons that Zaladane's awake and that it was she who blocked the shot. And we get this little moment here with Nereel thinking affirming that Peter is still her love, and if only there was some way that she could ease his torment. Well, why not talk? Why not communicate? Is my first thought on that point. And then what happens is everybody is continuing their journey back to the village, Nereel's village, and what happens is that Psylocke here is thinking that if the X-Men remain in the Savage Land, they should be able to avoid the fate that she saw in her dream vision. And she thinks to warn the others that if they return to Australia, they will all surely die. And just at that point, Gateway teleports them home to the Outback town in Australia. So ominous ending to the issue, and one that will get explored in the next one, 251. So I hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 251. If you did, please like the video, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.